Today is September 1st, 2022. In Lubbock, Texas, it is 87 degrees and the campus is just beginning to dry out from a few uncharacteristically rainy weeks. Here on the campus of Texas Tech University, red and black streamers flutter from every light pole and street sign in preparation for the first TTU football game of the season on Saturday. Meanwhile, as today's history shapes itself, this is the untold story of Joe Dale Bryan, born on September 27th of 1936, here in Lubbock, Texas. His is a story of forging a family on the South Plains, going to high school alongside Buddy Holly, and living through the hair-raising 1970 tornado. Mr. Bryan is interviewed here by his grandson, Mr. John Lafreniere.
Joe Dale Bryan, I was born here in Lubbock, February 27, 1936. Lived here all my life except for a couple of years in law school at the University of Texas.
Can you describe what you remember about Lubbock, your hometown, before the age of 16?
Before the age of 16, there's a lot to say about it, but
Some of the highlights.
well, I really don't know, John. Like a more specific question.
Yeah. What?
Remember the old Hilton Hotel, which is long gone, the Lubbock Hotel, which is now called Pioneer. We call the Marriott building's gone from Green building back to Marriott, back to Green. And Bill Wells has been redone a time or two. All those are gone.
How about your house? What's one of the first houses you remember living in?
First I remember when I was born, it was on 28th and T at the edge of town.
Okay.
And then we moved to 31st and what was then college, now university, and it was on the edge of town. That was about 1942.
Okay, so the town's grown quite a bit since.
A whole bunch.
Oh yeah, you said that was the edge of town, and right now I think that's the edge of town the opposite direction now.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, how about when you were a kid? Do you remember when you learned how to ride a bike?
I really don't. I just remember being able to ride a bike. Of course, I was fortunate there. I had my brother's old hand-me-down. They never would let me have one, so I got his hand-me-down bicycle.
Do you remember what it looked like?
It was a Swin, red Swin.
Red Swin. That's kind of the classic bicycle. That's a fun one.
Remember putting a racer seat on to modernize it, you know.
Oh yeah, because you didn't want it to be a hand-me-down.
Right.
Very fun, very fun. How about friends? Did you have a best friend growing up?
Mostly friends there, talk about grade school, junior high school, maybe they left over into college too. Gary Mathis, Benny Davis, Dan Ratliff. In fact, I say Dan had known me my whole life. He's a year older and he lived just a block from me, so from where I was born.
When you think about that group of friends, what do you think something that they remembered about you?
I don't know. We just played a lot of sandlot ball, that type of thing back then.
Yep.
We didn't have any organized football or baseball. Pre all that.
When you say you played a bunch of sandlot, did you organize that? Did other people organize that? How did it all come together?
We just all did.
Yeah.
Just all did. And it was not baseball, it was always softball, I guess. So the ball wouldn't go too far. Find a vacant lot somewhere and use that.
Okay. Very fun. How about your family? When you're sitting around the house, can you describe your family to me?
Well, there were four of us. Dad was Lubbock County tax collector when he was over there from about 1930 to about 1955, off and on, at the courthouse. And mother was a stay-home housewife. She never worked any that I know of, except maybe before they got married. And I had an older brother, Jim, who was practically about 5 years older than I was. And the way the grade system was then, I had to go 12 and he only had to go 11, so we never were in the same school, I think. It maybe did pretty 1 year
When you were growing up, do you remember when your family got your first television?
First television, I was in high school. That would probably been about 1951 or 2. I do remember when we got it.
Do you remember watching anything in particular on it?
No, I was too busy in high school. High school activities then.
High school activities?
Yeah,
Is
that was for old folks to watch TV. I never did watch it.
Okay. Was it, I remember you talking some about maybe the first neighborhood TV. Was that a big deal? At least for the old folks?
I remember a friend of mine was Dale Bryan with a T. His dad started Channel 11. And they had a TV in their house. And Joe Sam was always he expounded a little bit, but he's always telling me, come over and we'll watch Oklahoma City's TV station some night. Went over there, couldn't get anything.
Very fun. Very fun. So that's why they had to start their own news station, I guess.
Right.
All right. So you talked some about your first TV. Do you remember the first family car that you had?
First family car I remember was a 1941 Chevrolet.
Okay.
We were fortunate because that was just before World War II, and they cut off making them for civilians in early 1942. And so that was a new car. 41 was. We go until 46 late 46 when we got a second Chevrolet, which is exactly like the first.
And you said 1946, so that would have been just after the war?
Just after World War II. Dad signed up down at Kirkendall Chevrolet. They had a list of people signed when they could get a car, and he said number 13 slot was still open, so he put his name in there.
So talk to me more about World War II. What do you remember about, not necessarily the war, but what was life like here in Lubbock during World War II?
Well, we had 2 Army bases. Prior to the Air Force, but they were both tied to the Air Force. But they were all Army, U.S. Army. We had one that now where Reese Air Force Base was, that was called Lubbock Army Airfield, and then the one where the municipal airport was South Plains Army Airfield. The South Plains was a glider school. That's where they did all the training for those gliders that they dropped over on D-Day in World War II. And you'd see them flying around and cutting them loose, and then they'd drop the cable on them. So we had a lot of soldiers on the street.
Was there anything that you remember about that may have impacted you besides just the things that you saw? Anything that you remember during World War II?
I do remember Dad had a rent house out on 32nd Street and University, and he rented to some airmen. Reese, Lubbock Army Airfield was a training base for new pilots. One of the pilots apparently was connected to Budweiser or somebody up in St. Louis, Missouri. He vacated the house. We went out there and we had to clean out case after case after case of empty bottles, Budweiser beer bottles out of the house.
Great. So let's talk about school for a little bit. When you were growing up, what were the schools that you went to?
I went first and second grade at Dupree, which is at 20th and Avenue T. Then we moved from the 28th Street house over to 31st Street house, and I went to Roscoe Wilson the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Then they kicked me out in the 6th grade and moved the line, so I had to go back to Dupree.
Hold
It was fine.
I've got to stop you there. When you say they kicked you out,
They literally did, because I wanted to stay there with my friends, so I went over the first day, and they caught me trying to stay in the class. They came and pulled me out of class, sent me on my way.
I did not know that one. Okay. So that was elementary and middle school. Where'd you go to high school?
Well, that wasn't middle school.
Oh, that was...
Middle school was junior high then.
Okay.
And I went all 3 years to JTH junior high, brand new. first year I was in it. We started the first half of the year. We actually went to the old Slayton building before they finished up JTH. Then went over there to it after Christmas. So we were the first ones to use it. We had the 50th anniversary or something of it, and I got to attend it, and it still looks good. Still looks like the old school. They've added on to it a little bit.
All right. How about where did you go to high school?
Went to Lubbock High School. We called it the only high school in town then, even though we had Dunbar.
Any famous individuals at school with you when you were attending Lubbock High School?
Probably the one that everybody will remember was Buddy Holly. He was a grade behind us. He was actually 6 months younger than I was. He just fell on the wrong side of September 1st. He was in one class with me in junior high, JTH, in a journalism class. We were just know each other, and that's all. I didn't know any other student.
Yeah, that's neat still. Do you remember your first car that you had when you first learned how to drive?
Well, I learned how to drive before I had my first car, but the first car I actually had of my own when I was a senior in high school, spring. Dad bought an old 1949 Oldsmobile coupe that had been a bootlegger's car. He bought it from the sheriff's department. They had confiscated it. Got it for $100. It had overload springs in it and shot transmission. But somebody stole the radio out of it and I had to put that in. But I drove that for about 9 months till I was a freshman at Tech.
So you went from Lubbock High to Texas Tech.
Yes, sir.
All right. And what did you study at Tech?
I was in pre-law and business administration. I ended up getting a degree in accounting at Tech. I was out there 3 years, going summers and winters both. I was able to get out in 1957 from there. Graduated from Lubbock County in '54. Then went to law school at the University of Texas, summers and winters, and got out of there in 2 years. So 5 years after graduating from Lubbock High, I was through with all 2 degrees.
Made it through that pretty quick, and you mentioned that was the only time that you didn't live in Lubbock your entire life was law school.
I always claimed that Lubbock being hometown, and I just kind of visited down in Austin.
All right, so we talked a lot about school. Let's talk about your family. When did you meet your wife?
I guess we knew each other forever because we were both in the same Sunday school class at First Methodist Church from childhood up. She was also born in Lubbock, and actually she was about 40 days older than I was. So we were knew each other not well until high school. We got to knowing each other, and we didn't start going together until college.
And when you guys started dating, who started that off? Were you chasing after her, or how did you guys decide you wanted to start dating after knowing each other for so long?
Well, the boys always asked for the date. Back then, I don't know what they do these days. But we hadn't liked each other too well in high school. She was on student council and I wasn't, and they had proposed some kind of motion, and she had in senior class one day, and I moved to table it, and that made her mad. So she didn't like me at all in high school.
What do you think changed?
What changed?
Yeah.
Just time and circumstances.
Time and circumstances. I like it. So you met, you dated, you got married. Did you have any kids?
I had 3 daughters. And they were all born in the same hospital, West Texas Hospital, that I was. I think that was Maine and Avenue L. It's not there anymore. It's been turned into something else.
And when were they born?
Born in 1960, 61, and 63.
Was there anything significant about the date of the one that was born in 1963? Is it close to any historical
Yep,
events?
it was. Funny thing on that, I always pose a question to people: can you have three daughters that are youngest to the oldest is less than 3.5 years? Presidential term is 4 years, and they each had a different president when they were born. Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson. The last one, Judy, was born the day they were burying Kennedy on that Monday. I always say when John did his little salute to her, well, that's when she was born.
Do you remember much about when Kennedy was assassinated?
Oh yeah. You just sitting there in the office, and the secretary came in and told me, and then I tried to find my pregnant wife, who was 9 months pregnant. She was out running around shopping, I guess. I couldn't find her all day long. I was afraid she might go in the shop and have the kid then.
Do you remember feeling any particular way?
Well, you couldn't believe it, something like that happening. And you're old enough to remember it, because I was, by then, I don't know, 24, 30 years old, 25 to 30 years old. And whereas when Pearl Harbor came along, I was just a 5-year-old kid, and I don't even remember it happening. I just remember we were always at war while I was in grade school.
So you had three girls and the wife. Can you describe what some of your family traditions look like? Maybe what did the evenings look like after you got home from work, or what did the weekends look like when they were growing up?
The 3 girls, it's a big mess. They got toys all over the place. Now they had some extracurricular activities. All 3 of them took piano or something like that. Not extensively. A couple of them played basketball. That's when sports started getting organized. They were on girls' basketball teams. And the youngest one was, for some reason, she was short, but she could shoot a long ball, and she made a lot of long shots.
How about holidays? What would a Thanksgiving look like on a typical Thanksgiving for you all?
My mother, being a stay-at-home wife and mother, she learned to cook somewhere. She was a great cook. So you always had a pretty big feast at both of those. You had your turkey and dressing and all of that stuff, homemade pies. She was good.
Right.
By the way, we used to go home for lunch when I was first growing up in grade school, and then even in junior high at lunch.
You'd come home.
We'd come home at lunch.
How about your daughters? Did they come home, or were they staying at school?
They all had to stay at school. Changed over from when I was in the 6th grade from an hour to 30 minutes lunch period.
That's definitely different than what I grew up with.
Right.
What was your first job that you worked out at full time after school?
I had got my accounting degree at Tech, and you needed a year of experience to take the last part of the CPA exam and to qualify as CPA. So I worked first for a year for a local CPA firm, and then went to work with the First National Bank as a trust officer, and I stayed there for over 40 years in the trust department, eventually manager of it, senior vice president.
When you were working there, what was a daily routine? What would that normally look like? When would you normally get there, and when would you go home, and what'd you do in between?
Didn't really have any set hours. You try to get there about 8 o'clock. Bank hours didn't make any difference. They're 9 to 3, but we would work from basically 8 to 6, maybe even 7 o'clock. Get most of your work done after the 3. It's a little bit quieter, that type of thing. Trust officer, you're managing other people's property, and having to pay money out to the beneficiaries. There's always a reason why a parent left the property in trust. I'm not going to say he didn't trust his children, but he just didn't trust their financial ability of being able to handle funds of their own. So we'd handle that for them, and that was always, you always caught in a real crossfire on trying to not make them justify their expenditure, but make sure that they're reasonable. When they grew up driving Chevrolets, you didn't buy them a new Mercedes or something like that after the parents died. You stuck with the Chevrolet.
Makes sense.
And every kid was always, well, that's not the way Mother and Dad intended the will to be. I've heard that time and time again.
When you were working, do you remember the Lubbock tornado when that happened?
I do very vividly. I was at home. We lived on 64th Street at that time, just off of Quaker, just off of Indiana. And I remember sirens going off, the TV going out. Joanne, my wife, was mad because it cut off a comedian that she was wanting to see on TV, and she couldn't understand why. That's before we knew that we'd had the tornado. And I remember that night because Dad was semi-lost in that we couldn't find him. He'd been down to Masonic Hall, which was right behind the Lubbock Hotel. And he got caught out there. He drove his car into Citizens National Bank's parking garage and rode it out. Saw a lot of walls falling down. Next day, I went down there and had my Levi's and boots on, and I decided I wasn't going to go through the door. I just walked through the window. There were no windows on that first floor of the bank building at all. They were 2 stories high and they were down, just demolished. They destroyed all the furniture in that lobby and counters and everything else. My office, I was pretty lucky. I lost all 3 windows, but for some reason the wind itself didn't come in. It just rained. I had files all over my desk and they were just soaked. And while I was helping clean up other parts of the bank, well, the secretary was in there taking my files and spreading them all around the room, trying to dry them out.
So your building was downtown, right where the tornado hit.
It's now the Wells Fargo building, and it was a brand new building. It's about a year or 2 years old, and never could find out how much it cost to repair it, but it exceeded what the original cost was.
And when you were down there, did you help clean up any after the?
Sure did. I was 35 years old, and so anybody that age or younger, they got to do the grunt work. We picked up some of those desks and put them in dumpsters and dump trucks and scooped shovels and picked up all that broken glass and stuff like that. And all that stuff people may not know of, but it's buried out there in the canyon on the north side of the town. And the dirt scrapers from Hancock Manufacturing Company covered them all up out there. Still out there.
I didn't know that, so that's very
He
interesting.
did that for free because he needed to demonstrate and use his dirt scrapers. He was competing with Caterpillar at the time.
Let's take a step back and just talk about life on the South Plains, life in Lubbock. What was the first movie that you ever saw in a theater?
That would really be hard to say, John. Comes to mind is something called How Green Was My Valley or something. I have no idea who was in it. I must have been 3 or 4. All I can remember, it seemed like there were coal mines in it, and it was in Ireland. It kind of competes with Gone with the Wind. I probably saw them about the same time. I think Gone with the Wind came out in 36, and I'm sure I saw it before 1940.
Do you remember the movie theater, or remember a movie theater from when you were a kid?
Probably it was one or two. There was the Lindsay Theater, which was on Main and Avenue K, and right across the street from it was what was called the Palace, and then later renamed the Clifton. It's probably one of those two. The Lindsay's owned most of the theaters in town. I do remember when we lived on 31st Street and I was in grade school, Dad would give me a quarter. I'd take the bus downtown for a nickel, and of course there's a nickel coming back. 9 cents for the show, and I'd bring Dad 6 cents back.
You didn't use the 6 cents
I
to get any popcorn?
Didn't get any popcorn and Coke. He always thought that was a big deal. He was proud of me, I think, for doing that. He'd come out of the real depression. I just came in on the tail end of it.
Did you go to the movies with your brother or with a friend or by yourself?
Usually with friends. Brother and I are too far apart. They're 4.5, 5 years apart, so there wasn't a lot of camaraderie there.
Any restaurants from Lubbock's bygone days that you wish were still around?
We didn't have many restaurants then. We had what we called cafes. Tech Cafe was down there. I saw a picture on the wall in here in the studio a while ago, and it's got Tech Cafe in it, which I'm sure it's not the same ownership, but it's the same name. And it's out on 50th Street now, and I still go to it. We had what we called the Chicken House. I think it was Casman's or something. It was on 19th and P. They stayed around for a long time. That's about the only real restaurant we had in town when I was growing up. We, like I said, stay-at-home mothers, and they cooked Sunday meal, put on a roast and so forth, and go to Sunday school and church, come home, it's ready.
What do you think is the most daring thing that you've ever done?
I think probably the one I remember the most was we'd gone out to Buffalo Lakes. Early Carpenter's family and our family. Early had been a friend of Dad's since Tech. He was first captain of the football team at Tech. And we went out there, and his son George, who was a couple of years older than my brother, and he and my brother and I went down to where the swimming hole was at Buffalo. And I couldn't swim. I was 9, 10, something like that. And they had a little float out in the, 100 feet out maybe. George took me out there and went back. Coming back, he must have gotten tired or something, and he let go of me, and I went under. And I didn't like that, so the next day I enrolled in swimming classes out at what we call Tumble In out at McKenzie Park, public pool, and I learned how to swim that week.
That seems like it was the right choice. Make sure that didn't happen again.
I never was a good swimmer, but at least I could keep myself afloat.
That's all that counts. You made it here. Think back to the best vacation that you've ever taken. Where do you think that was to?
As a child? Whatever.
Adult, child, and anything.
I can remember going to, about 5 years old, we went to a tax collector's convention in Houston, stayed at the old Rice Hotel, and I think it's been turned into condos since then downtown Houston. And we went out on some kind of barbecue or something out to San Jacinto, and all they had at that time was a monument for the Texas Centennial. I think it's about the time it was built for the war against Mexico. And they claim I had on a white suit, and it wasn't white when we got back.
Lots of dirt out
A
there.
lot of dirt out there. That's where the battleship Texas is. It's out there at the same place now, but it wasn't there at that time. That was before World War II.
Okay. When you came back from that trip, or really any other trip, what kind of feeling did you get when you returned to Lubbock?
Oh, I really want to be back in Lubbock. I like flat plains. No trees didn't bother me. Kid, you don't care whether it's hot or cold. You just enjoy it.
Just glad to be home.
You're just glad to be home.
All right. All right. So think back over the last year. What do you think has given you the most happiness during that time?
The last year?
Just the last year.
Oh, don't know anything. My wife died a little over a year ago, and it had been for my daughters and grandchildren. I wouldn't have made it through it. They were a big help to me.
Definitely been a different year then.
Yeah. 10 days after she died, my brother died, which was the only sibling I had. So lost them both about the same time.
I know it must be very nice to have family nearby.
It is.
All right, now we've got some additional questions that we're going to ask you. Tell me about 3 pairs of shoes. If you can't remember 3, tell me at least about 1 pair of shoes that has been important to you during your life.
We discussed that earlier before this interview, and I kind of think that was a question for women really to choose, because I was different in that most kids went barefooted all the time in the summer, and I always wore shoes. I never have been one to go barefooted. And but the shoes I remember were not shoes; they were boots. I remember a pair of calfskin boots that Dad had that I wore all through high school and wore them out. They were probably new when he got them, and he never got to use them. I wore them out. But I guess I wanted to be taller at that time.
Did he let you borrow them, or did he give them to you?
I doubt it. I went in there and took them. I imagine.
All right. How about, can you remember the last time that you sang to yourself?
Never sang to myself. I can't remember that at all. I just don't do it.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, you can get.
Not a singer, that's why.
Not a singer.
I took music in 7th grade, and I think they probably failed me in that, and I never got back into it.
All right, here's maybe a tougher one. When was the last time that you cried?
When my wife died. And I'm sure I did the crying on my own, because I guess as a child, somebody ingrained in me that boys don't cry. So if I ever cried, it's by myself.
Well, I know that may have been something that you learned growing up, but it's all right to cry.
But you don't cry in front of others.
Is there anything about yourself that your friends or family might be surprised to learn?
I don't know whether they'd be surprised to learn or not. I think I'm more conservative than they think I am. Not just politics, but physical, way I conduct myself and that type of thing. I feel like I'm more patient than they think I am. My daughter would probably dispute that. But I really think I have more patience than they think I have.
All right. And then, what is your favorite photograph of your life? You think back on one that stands out.
John, I really don't know. But we've gone a long way in photographs. Gone from black and white to color to Polaroid. I can remember being out at in Arizona and taking Polaroid pictures, and you had to tear the back off of it for it to develop, and I remember it melting and never developing to where we've got the cameras now and your telephones. So I really don't remember a particular one. There's just a lot of photographs out there, I'm sure.
Or one that makes you smile when you walk by it in the house?
I don't smile that much.
All right, well, that was all the questions that I had for you today. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk about your life and your life here in Lubbock.
Thank you. Seems like Lubbock is obviously grown from probably 20 or 30,000 when I was born to 250,000 now. And we always lived on the edge of town, but now I'm beginning to live in the center of town. It's gone so far out. And one thing about Lubbock is if you don't like it, tear it down, we'll build something in its place. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a conversation with Joe Dale Bryan, lifelong resident of the South Plains for 86 years and counting. We'd like to thank him for sharing his story with us, as well as the sponsors of Lubbock's Untold Stories, the Helen Jones Foundation, Inc., the Department of English at Texas Tech University, and our community partners and supporters, Lubbock's Adult Activity Centers, the Louise Hopkins Underwood Center for the Arts, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, the Special Collections Library and Sowell Collection at Texas Tech, and Texas Tech Public Media, KTTZ. We hope you'll join us next time for another Untold Story.